The worker feeds a strand from the creel into a bobbing machine and dances around with it to aerate the fibers, before connecting it to the other side of the bobbing machine. The thread is knotted together and the machine is turned on, much to the dismay of the employees. The hypnotic dance of the machine's thread winding is said to cause nausea, cold sweats, and heart palpitations.
The idea that America is a third world country with a Gucci belt is ridiculous because the way we came to define what is the first and the third world is ridiculous. I believe we should restore the original meaning of it, which had nothing to do with the level of development, crime and corruption statistics, or the state of the economy. It was simply about ideological standing. The original meaning of the term first world was America and capitalist countries allied with America. The second world was the Soviet Union and socialist states allied with the Soviet Union, while the third world was the non-aligned movement and countries that fell right between the two leading ideologies in the world, which coincidentally meant the global south, the battleground of the Cold War and the battleground of the multipolar world we are entering. I really want to talk about what multipolarity means in the practical sense. This is my first video on the topic. Towards the 1990s, economists and other scholars started to take note of the development status of what was referred to as the Third World, and by the time the Soviet Union collapsed, the notion that the First World means rich, good, and divinely righteous, and the Third World means poor, bad, immoral, and disgusting was already installed into our minds. And then in the early 2010s, some liberals came up with the terms developed countries and underdeveloped countries, which is a kinder way of saying the same thing. So to call America a third world country with a Gucci belt and then act as if that is an insult perpetuates the notion that there is such a thing as a third world, a world where exploitation, corruption, and violence aren't something that we should strive to end and aren't something that we should take accountability for. It's just the way things are, right? You might think or act as if that is an insult against America, but it's an insult against the global south because it perpetuates an idea supported by hundreds of millions of people, including people in the global south itself, which is the notion that the third world is inherently violent, inherently corrupt, and backwards in every conceivable way. The idea that there's nothing you can do, they are just like that. So this whole thing to me is a very liberal, very bourgeois way of thinking because it doesn't take into consideration the role the first world had in systematically fucking over the global south for hundreds of years. And although I know some left-leaning people have said this phrase in an ironic sense, I've seen MAGA repeatedly use this phrase to refer to America during Trump's first candidacy, and I've seen Europeans of various political standings, including neo-Nazis, refer to America this way. When the reality is, America is and always will be the first world, and that is what the insult should actually be. To be first world means you have no problem with the exploitation of labor. You have no problem with the fact that misery, poverty, injustice, and exploitation exists as long as you yourself aren't physically affected. Sometimes, even if you are affected by it, a first worlder is a capitalist that hoards wealth, an oligarch that manipulates and exploits for his own benefit. It is an entertainer that stirs divisions for profit. It is a working class citizen that is more concerned with the ethnic, cultural, and religious cohesion of his neighborhood than he is with the exploitation of his and his people's mind, soul, body, and labor, all done for the sake of capital. That is where the insult should actually lay. If I were to update the original definition of those terms, it'd be very simple. First world is capitalist and imperialist. It is the bourgeois democracies, bourgeois dictatorships, and theocracies, the aristocracies and the bourgeois democracies that comprise the imperialist core, which is the EU, NATO, America, and its vassal states, such as Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. But first world is also the oligarchies in opposition to the imperialist core, or in other words, Russia, meaning being first world doesn't necessarily mean being pro-American or in favor of the neoliberal world order, but it also includes any bourgeois democracy that doesn't have an empire of its own but is still gladly sucks imperialist cock, like Argentina and the Zionist Venezuelan opposition do. Second world is socialist and anti-imperialist, and because of this, it only categorically includes North Korea, Cuba, Vietnam, and China, and then both the collectivist inclined Burkina Faso and the theocratic government of the Ayatollahs in Iran, the most blazingly anti-imperialist countries in the world. Third world is an illusion. It exists in our minds but not in reality. Maybe the appropriate term for this part of the world would be neo-colonized. The layout on this map that I am creating for my next video, where I will try to define who's first and who's second world, lines up very closely with how the Cold War played out, which leads me to the belief this multipolar world will be one that, much like the Cold War, will be fought for and paid for with African, Asian, and South American blood. This is the price we'll have to pay if we wanted to move away from the unipolar world we live in. I wanted to start this multipolarity series by making it clear the Cold War was indeed a multipolar world. Part of the reason why we focus so much on the bipolar aspect of the Cold War is frankly because we don't see the Third World as inhabiting human beings. We see it as inhabiting assets to be used. There was a non-aligned movement that was desperately trying to carve its own space. This movement included Cuba, it included Egypt, and then the United Arab Republic, at a time when Pan-Arab unity was born and then mercilessly killed by Israel so hard that the Muslim world remains divided till this day. Today, that movement is still alive, and its map is a roadmap to where most of the bombs will drop as the fabrics of the neoliberal world order collapse, and we once again enter multipolarity. The people I see talking about multipolarity are either liberals who talk of it in terms of it being a great tragedy for human rights and democracy, or they are right-wingers who can't wait to see the neoliberal world order burn to the ground, or they are leftists who talk of it in terms of it being the opportunity we have for increased social mobility, increased anti-American and anti-imperialist sentiment, and increased class consciousness in the form of a move towards socialism, which could and should be the outcome here, but not a lot of people talk about the violence that multipolarity entails. It actually is the 1980s once again. Donald Trump is Reagan, and if you live in the global south, any politician in your country that has ties to Trump's America and his vision are the Contras. The fact that in the first few days of 2026, Trump struck Venezuela, Nigeria, with the Nigerian government's consent by the way, and Syria, perfectly follows the roadmap I just gave you. One of the consequences of multipolarity is that the number and the intensity of foreign interventions in the global south will increase. It will be a time of increased blazing proxy wars, and it will be a time of coup d'etats out in the open. They have already tried to kill Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. Mossad is in Tehran organizing protests, they took Maduro, and if Venezuela continues to sell oil to China, there's one card on the table that we don't even talk about at all, which is the country of Guyana, and this is something for my next video. A multipolar world is one where American global hegemony comes to an end, which is a good thing, but to act as if this will certainly bring a second red wave of socialist fervor across the world is a bit naive. If you want a multipolar world, especially if you live in the global south like I do, you should be aware and willing to pay for it with blood.